Hello, and welcome to a special painting session in honor of Dia de los Muertos. This painting session is hosted by Garden City Arts, and it is part of our month-long celebration of Day of the Dead. We do have a few other ways that you can celebrate as a family with Day of the Dead. Be sure to check those out on our website if you want more information. Now, before we get to painting, let's talk about what we're going to need today. So first off, we need paint and a black canvas. Make sure you have your canvas painted black before you get started. It needs to be dry, otherwise it's going to be a little bit difficult to complete this painting as I have set up for you in the video. Your paint, I would suggest getting a heavy bodied acrylic paint. That's what's going to work the best. And I would suggest these 4 colors. You don't need a lot for this painting. First, you want to have a blue. I picked the cerulean blue. You want to have white. This is titanium white. This is cadmium yellow, and this is Mars black. Okay? Any colors are just fine. This is your painting, and if you want to add some additional colors to this, awesome, go for it. I'm just going to show you kind of the basics, and then you can have fun with the embellishments. So, make sure you have your paint on hand. You'll also want a piece of chalk. You'll want a cup for paint water, paper towel, and you'll want some brushes. These are just brushes that I suggest you use. You don't have to have all of these. Really, you can probably make anything work. The only one that's absolutely essential would be the round brush. This is a number 4. I would pick a smaller one. If I were you, I grabbed the wrong one, but we'll make it work. I'd also have a shader brush on hand because it does come in handy when doing details. And last, you want to have a wash brush. Now, if you're impatient like me and like to go fast, you can get the bigger wash brush, the better. If you are more detailed or like a beginner painter, then a smaller brush might work better. So make sure you have some brushes on hand. I'm also going to have an extra plate because I'm really bad at drawing circles. If you are too, then you might want to have some kind of a circular object that will help you draw out your moon shape. And now that we've talked about what you need, let's talk about a few basics really fast, and then we'll get to painting. So I'm going to teach you just a few basic tips and tricks on this canvas before we get started. And then the way we walk through this painting, I'm going to show you how to do this step by step. At the end of each step, I'm going to put up on the screen the finished product on the left-hand side and the step that you need to be on in order to move forward on the right-hand side. So now that you kind of know like how I'm going to handle this video or how I'm going to teach you or walk you through this painting, let's talk about brush technique. It's very important. Really fast. You can erase paint if you get to it soon enough, okay? So it's always important to try to erase before covering it up. There are 2 options if you make mistakes: erase and cover it up with paint. Keep in mind in your head, paint covers paint. It's not the end of the world. However, it is much easier to erase, in my opinion, than covering up, for instance, black paint in a white area. So I'm going to just quickly show you. Let's say I made a mistake. X marks the mistake. All I have to do before it dries is grab a clean brush. I want to get it damp. And then I scribble back and forth as quickly as possible before the paint dries. And I can clean it up. Now I can erase it completely, or maybe it just needs to be pushed back into like a little dot. Maybe I should have made a dot instead of an X. Well, I can do that. Okay, do you see how you can control it? Wiggling it back and forth is very important, and every once in a while you'll have to clean off your brush to get all that extra paint out, and then voila, it's all clean. So keep in mind you can erase tonight. Now let's talk about how to use your brushes. I'm going to show you how to use it in 2 different ways. First, if you use it so that you're using the top edge of the brush, you're holding it kind of perpendicular to your canvas, you will create a really nice thin line, okay? Now, sorry, I have to erase as I go. Otherwise, I'll have some really weird lines on my canvas that I'll be fighting for the rest of the night. Okay. If, after you've done a line, you want to fill in, then you use the side edge of your brush to fill in an area, okay? So, top edge of the brush is for lines, side of the brush is for filling in. It makes bigger, it covers up more and more quickly. Okay. So, once again, I'm demonstrating that you can erase, and sometimes a piece of paper really comes in handy. Okay, so we've talked about brush technique, we've talked about paint, we've talked about how we're going to work through this video. Let's talk really fast about cleaning our brushes, and then we'll move on. So whenever I have a dirty brush, I want to swirl my brush in the paint water. You can tap it on the rim of the can or your cup, and you just want to press out all that extra water, and then you pat it dry. You want to make sure that your brush is not dripping wet whenever you use it on the canvas, and you want to make sure it's not bone dry either, okay? That's very important to have the right amount of water in your brush. Okay, I've covered all the basics. Now we're finally ready to move on. Let's get this painting started. Okay, we're ready for step number one. Step number one involves a plate. We are going to lay this plate down on our canvas wherever you want the moon. If you're really good at drawing circles, power to you. You don't need the plate. And I'm going to quickly go around, maybe pour a piece of chalk. Okay, quickly go around my plate. And keep in mind that this is going to be a crescent moon, so we're going to erase some chalk in a second. But I just want to have a perfect circle. Now, after I have the perfect circle, I'm not going to erase or anything until I know how I want to put the inside. So we have a big huge circle, and now we're going to put the letter C inside to create the other side of our crescent moon. So I'm going to just quickly make some starting marks, and that's going to be for the ends of our crescent. And then I'm going to make a nice big sweeping circle. And keep in mind that you will probably adjust this as you go. I'm making a nice big C to connect those two, but you'll probably notice that my C has a lot of thickness. Let me rephrase that. I apologize. My C is pretty small, so it allows the tips of my crescent to be really small, and then has a little bit more thickness right where we're going to put a space, and then it goes back to being thin. And remember, you can kind of adjust and scribble and scratch until you have exactly what you want. After you have what you want, you take a clean damp brush and you can erase the chalk quite easily, so that you can get rid of all those lines that were kind of mistake lines. And then you'll have a really nice, oops, don't erase the lines you want to keep. Then you'll have a really nice crescent moon outline. Okay, next we have to put in the nose and the mouth. This part's probably the hardest. This is the thing that other people have struggled with when I've taught this painting before. First, you want to figure out what kind of nose you want. I went with like a cute little knobby nose. You could do a more pointed nose. It's up to you. I'm going to put in a nose about in the middle of the crescent of where it bends. And then I want to make sure that I have a little bit of a lip, and then I put a very thin V for the opening of the Calavera inspired moon. And there we go. So I have my moon drawn out. Now my moon is really angled up and looking upwards. If you don't like that, you can adjust it. For instance, you could add some more here, and then he's not looking up so much, or maybe move the nose and the mouth up. It's up to you. This is your painting, so you decide what you like and what you don't. after you have it drawn out, we're ready to move on. So we have our guide. Now we're going to start adding some color. We're going to start with the blue, and the reason we're doing that is we don't want a boring black background. We want it to look like the moon is glowing. So we're going to take some of this blue. We're going to stay outside of the moon. We don't want to paint inside the moon. And we're going to put this blue in the center of our crescent and around the outside. So the first thing I do is I start with kind of a ball. And from this ball, we're going to have these blue lines radiate out, okay? So they're going to go outwards and fill up our canvas, avoiding our moon, of course. So I'm using the top edge of my brush, and I am painting in these nice curvy lines. You're gonna have to move your brush a little bit. So what I mean by that is you kind of twist it. It starts off in one direction and then it twists and goes all the way around, keeping it nice and thin, okay? Now, this looks really bright, but when it dries, it is going to be really toned down and closer to black. Now, if your paint is dry and scratchy like mine is, you can mix some water into your paint. Mixing water into your paint will make it more transparent, but it'll also make it easier to use. Transparent paint is not a bad thing, especially on these outer edges, because that is what's going to make it look like it's kind of faded to black. It's going to go from bright blue to kind of the black, okay? It's allowing the black to show through the blue more. It's not covering up the black as much. So I'm just going to quickly finish. I started again with my ball in the middle, and then I radiate out around. I need to go and radiate out around the outside edges of my moon on all sides. I've only done these two corners so far. So let me do this. And then once you've reached the corners and the edges of your canvas, you're good. You're done radiating. So now your canvas is going to have more of a glow and not just be an empty, devoid black space. Okay, so I'm just going to finish this up really fast and then we'll move on in just a moment. Okay, so now that we have the background kind of sorted, our glow is started, we are going to paint the moon itself. The first layer is going to be just straight white, okay? Just white. Then we'll come back in and do a bit of a yellow tint to it. So really fast, the first layer is not going to look great. Do you see how there's some black showing through? No worries. That's why it's the first layer. The second layer will look better. So I'm going to use the top edge of my brush and I'm going to go around my chalk lines and I'm going to create kind of a guide for myself. Now keep in mind, this is the moon we're painting. It's been around for a very long time and it's been battered by a whole bunch of stuff in space. So if it's a little bit bumpy, that's okay. We can just say it was meant to be bumpy. So I'm going to outline my moon with my white. Once I get into the nose and the mouth, I'm going to switch it up to a smaller brush. That way I don't give him a really big nose on accident. And then after I have the outline completed with using the top edge of my brush, I can use the side of my brush, go right up to the outline and bring the paint in. So see how I'm painting from the outside towards the inside of the moon. And I'm going to do this all the way around until I have my moon completely filled in. Now, if your moon looks textured like this and scratchy, that means that your paint is dry and it's picking up the texture of your canvas. Add some water to it and look how much smoother it is. It'll cover that up. Okay, and not leave quite so much texture. So I'm going to quickly fill this in. I'm not going to make you watch. I'm just going to put up the end screen so you can see what the end goal is. I suggest you pause the video as you're painting in your first layer of white. Remember, it does not have to be perfect, and it's not going to look great yet because it's the first layer. We'll put a second layer on and it'll look amazing. Okay, let's go ahead and get those brushes moving. Okay, so we have our moon filled in for the first layer. It's gonna look rough, don't worry. Now, while we're letting that while we're letting that dry, we're going to focus on the stars for just a little bit. When you're doing your stars, I would suggest not using straight white. Instead, I would suggest dulling it down with just a smidge, the little tiniest amount of blue, to make for a light blue. This light blue is going to look really nice, and it's not going to detract or distract your eye from the actual moon itself, okay? By putting some blue in it or some black in it, we are basically making it less bright, and so therefore less noticeable or have less emphasis. Okay, so I have my light blue paint. I'm using my round brush because we're going to put in some little dots and things. I'm going to start with a little starburst or a glowing star. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw a nice straight line, a vertical line. Then I'm going to put in a horizontal line, and then I'm going to put an X through that. And that's going to be my glowing star. Now, I would suggest adding maybe a little bit more water to your paint than what I did right there. That's pretty bright. So if you want maybe a dollar star, again, something to not distract from your moon, then you're going to add water to it to make the paint more transparent so that it's not quite so bright. Basically, it allows more of the black to show through. Now, when you're adding the little baby stars, you're not going to use the top of your brush, you're going to use the back of the brush or the butt of the brush. You're going to dip it on into the paint, and then you're going to dot it on your canvas, and that creates really nice, perfect little dots. Now, stars are really nice, but they can go a little crazy. You can go overboard with stars. So I would make sure that you just put maybe 20 or less stars. Don't go too crazy. Remember, you can put some inside and some outside our crescent. And of course, you can put some more starburst in if you really want. I like them, I think they're pretty. I might put like a little smaller one and then a bigger one. I'm going all out with my stars. Don't be like your teacher, unless you like it too. Okay, so I now have a good background and we can move on. This was a really easy step. We're ready to move back to our moon. We might have to let our paint dry a little bit. The first layer of paint has to be dry before we put down the second layer of paint. So I'm going to let this dry, and then we will move on to the next step. Okay, we're ready to move on to our second layer on our moon. So before we start painting, we need to take a little bit of white, actually a lot of it. This moon is big. And then we need to take just a little bit of yellow and mix these colors in to get kind of an off-white. This off-white is going to be the yellowish glow or tint of our moon. Okay, so now that I have that, I am going to start painting in, and because my brush was really dirty, I'm just filling in the center real fast to clean it up. We're going to start filling in the second layer of our moon. Now, just like before, we're going to start right along the edge, use the top of our brushes, and outline first. Then you bring it in and fill in. You're going to be using a lot of paint, So if you run out of the color that you mixed up, no worries, just mix up more. If it's not exactly the same, that's fine. It's the moon. We talked about this earlier. It's been around for a really long time. It's been battered. So maybe that's just a crater. Yeah. And so we're going to put another layer of paint on our moon. It is going to be quite thick and heavy, okay? Because we really do want to cover up the majority of the dark spots. We want to get it to the point where it's ready to paint. So I'm going to finish filling in my moon, and then we will be ready to move on. So you don't have to watch me paint. I'm going to put up the end screen, and remember, you can just pause it there until you're ready to move on. All right, let's get painting. Okay, we're ready for the very last step. Now, before we move on, one thing. You'll want to make sure that your second layer of paint is dry. If you are a perfectionist and you do not like some of these imperfections that I'm just embracing as craters on the moon, then you can do a third layer of paint. But you'll have to pause the video, do a third layer, and let it dry again. Okay, before you can move on to the final step. So the final step is to make our beautiful man on the moon more of a calavera and less of a man on the moon. So we are going to do that by giving our man on the moon a traditional calavera face. So a big eye socket with maybe some embellishments around it. Of course, nostril is always good, and then also lines for teeth. After we get the face done, we're going to move on to the embellishments on the moon itself. These embellishments can be anything. They can be similar to what I do if you want to go and off of something and you need that guidance, or they can be more personal and maybe reflect the person that you have lost and are celebrating and remembering. Also keep in mind, if you choose to put colors on your moon, think about what those colors represent. In Day of the Dead, for Day of the Dead, colors are very significant. Purple, for instance, I believe is the national color of mourning in Mexico, and it represents suffering, grief, mourning, pain. Pink means celebration, white symbolizes purity and hope, and yellow is the color of death. So keep in mind when you're choosing your colors, they do tell a story. Okay, so let's get started. Now, if you have a pencil, that might be a good idea to draw out your details first. I usually don't encourage people to use pencils because it will show through the paint. However, since we're painting black on top of it, you should be okay. Also, the white chalk isn't really going to do anything since we have a white moon now. If you have a different color of chalk, like purple, blue, what have you, then you will be able to draw this out just like we did when we were using the white chalk. Okay, so I'm gonna just wing it because I don't want to draw with graphite. I do not suggest doing this unless you like erasing. I will be erasing a lot due to my winging it. Very first thing I'm going to do is just start off really simple and easy and kind of test out my ability to make lines. The harder you press on your brush, the thicker your line is going to be. The lighter you press, the thinner the line. If you need to, steady your hand with your pinky. That's what I do when I am trying to make really detailed, curvy lines, okay? That helps a lot. So I'm going to take paint mixed in with a little bit of water, and I'm going to start drawing on the teeth. So I'm basically just starting right at the mouth opening and putting in these little lines. And that is going to immediately make it more recognizable as a calavera. Okay, I'm doing it to both the top and the bottom. and they can be a little curvy, that's okay. If your brush starts to run out of paint, make sure you grab some more as you go. Okay, next, the nostril. This part is hard. I'm not going to lie to you. The thing I start off with is just a nice little oval. Okay, and I want to start pretty low, close to the bottom of the nose, and then I do a nice big curvy line, kind of like the letter C, that connects back to the nostril. And I just fill in a little bit of space so it looks kind of like a fish with a really extravagant tail. Okay, so there's my nostril. Now, next I'm going to give the eye, and the eye, I want it to be kind of like a gumdrop shape, okay, or a triangle with round points. So I'm going to start by just putting a little bit of a curve where I want the top of the eye, and then a little bit of a bigger curve where I want the bottom of the eye. Okay, that's going to be a good guide. And then I just fill those in so it no longer looks like he's sleeping, and it now looks like a skull eye. Of course, you're going to fill it in solid. I would probably pick a different brush for that. Remember, the round brush is really good for lines and especially curvy lines, but your shader brush and wash brush are going to be better for filling in. Now, I have the outline of my eye, but I want to go ahead and do the little scallop pattern all the way around. So I'm going to take my time, really rest my hand on my canvas so that I can make sure that I am getting really nice clean lines that are as thin as possible. This would be a good opportunity to add color, fill in different colors inside these scallops, for instance. So if you're trying to figure out how to add color, it might be that you are creating shapes like petals, flowers, and then adding color inside those shapes. Remember to outline first. Okay, so I am just about done with this, and then I'm going to show you a few of the other embellishments I'm going to do, and then really, after I have showed you the basic techniques, it's really up to you to do your own thing and fill in the moon with information or lines that you like and that you want to choose. Okay, so I have kind of a rough outline of my eye, and next I'm going to just do a little bit of scroll work similar to what I did before. Basically, you want to think of how to fill in the space and maybe how to make one thing run into another. So I'm going to start with an S right here just to fill in some space, just like I did on the original. And you know, I can come back and perfect this later, but I'm just going to get in like the basics, and then just to show you, and then really, you know, stop painting and pause the video so that you can paint and not just be watching me. So I have my S, and then what I mean by figuring out how to fill in space and have one thing connecting to another, I might take like the curve of this S and add another curvy line that grows into its own little shape. Okay, so that's what I mean by try to figure out ways of growing your detail and adding to it. So I'm just going to add some more. And then maybe think about the edges of my moon. So far I've been focusing kind of on the middle. So maybe I'm going to put like a big huge flower right here blooming and coming off of the edge of my moon. So keep in mind, I'm just going to run through the tips again just so that maybe this will help you. Keep in mind, if your paint is dry and scratchy, it probably means that your brush means one of two things, or it might mean both things. Your paint doesn't have enough water in it, or your paintbrush is running out of paint, okay? So mix water into your paint, reload your paintbrush. Those two things are really important to make sure that you have really nice clean lines. Otherwise, your lines will be harder to control and they might be a little bit thicker, which that's okay. There's nothing wrong with thick lines. No stress. Keep in mind, I'm doing something fairly intricate. If that's not your thing, or if you're just not at that level where you are comfortable doing intricate lines, you can simplify, okay? Don't feel like you have to do what I do. Look up some inspiration if you need to, okay? Don't stress too much, and remember, you can always erase if you hit it fast enough, or paint covers paint, okay? Put a layer of your off-white yellowish paint, blah, 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 and cover up whatever mark you messed up, okay? So I am going to just continue doing this. However, I'm going to pause the video and put up the end screen so that you can work at your own pace. Keep in mind, you can add color, you can do whatever kind of lines you want to do. Have fun with this and be creative. And remember, you can also personalize it to make it more symbolic of the person that you're celebrating during Dia de los Muertos. So I hope that you all have a wonderful celebration. I hope you all had fun, and be sure to send us pictures of your painting when you're finished. We'd love to see those. Have a great day. Thank you for watching this Garden City Arts program. Please help us thank our generous sponsors.